Hello everybody, and welcome back to Sophisticakes by Mary. For this tutorial, I'm going to do another Valentine's Day themed cake that featured some ruched fondant hearts, some macarons, and I also show you how you can make your own rice paper confetti sprinkles in any color that you want. So if this sounds interesting, let's get right to it. First of all, we're going to make our confetti sprinkles. What I have here is water. I like to use some warm water, some spring roll wrappers or rice paper wrappers. I have some silicone mats on a sheet pan, and I'm going to color these red to go with Valentine's Day. Now you could use whatever color you want to use. That's why I like this, is because it's completely customizable. You can use whatever color you want. The rice paper is neutral, clear, so it absorbs whatever color you put into the water. And if you want a more depth of color, you can do more of whatever color that you want. I'm using regular just gel food colorings. And then I just lay them on the nonstick mats, kind of flat. Well, as flat as you can get them. It doesn't really matter. They're going to kind of form their own shape as they cook, because we're going to put them in the oven. But before we do that, gonna go ahead and use some luster dust. What did I use? I used a bright reddish pink, and then I used some pearl luster dust. Now just go ahead and put it in your preheated oven on the lowest setting and keep your eye on it. I would say these took about 15 to 20 minutes. And you'll know that they're done when they have kind of pulled away from the mat. And while that's going, I'm gonna make the ruched fondant hearts. Now I just rolled 2 thin pieces of fondant. I added some Tylose because I wanted these to firm up, some of them, so that they keep their shape on the cake. The Tylose makes your fondant a gum paste, is what it basically does. And I just put some water on the bottom piece, and I'm just using my fingers to form these little folds in pleats in the second piece of fondant. Now this just kind of forms itself. You just kind of use your fingers to guide it. Now it's going to want to stick to the bottom piece, so all you have to do if you need to remove it is just pull it away and then move it where you want, and use whatever cutters you want. You don't have to use hearts. That's just what I was doing for this theme. Dip them in some cornstarch and just use them as you would a regular cookie cutter. And there you have your hearts. Now just smooth those edges. And there we go. And I did this with the white. It's actually kind of a creamy color. Well, I'll just call it white. White, and I did red. Now, some of them I'm going to want them to stick up. So I'm just using a skewer. I dipped it in water and just kind of pushed it into the bottom. Now, I did place skewers and toothpicks in different ones at different angles so that these hearts wouldn't have to just stick straight up all the time on all of them. I wanted them to kind of have some angles to them. And this is what your wafer paper is going to look like. I always do that. Rice paper is going to look like after it's done. It has a nice sheen to it. Now you're going to want to use, this is called a Ninja. You can probably even use a food processor or any kind of a kitchen tool that's going to emulsify it down into more of a flake. These kind of look like flakes to me. But we're going to, the confetti sprinkles, flakes, whatever you want to call them. You can make them as fine as you want. I mean, you could even pulse that down to a fine dust if you want to. I haven't done that yet. That might be an idea. Or you can leave it even chunkier if you want. And for these white hearts, there actually were an ivory fondant that I had. I used that ivory as just a neutral background because I knew I was going to do airbrush, gold airbrush on top of these. And basically it's just my gold luster dust mixed with some Everclear in a very thin consistency so that you can use that in your airbrush without it clogging it too much. And you can see I'd had some other decorations that I was putting gold on also, but those were for the cake that you already saw, the other Valentine's Day cake. I do 2 cakes per week, so there's a little bit of overlap sometimes. And for the red ones, I used a combination of a bright pink, and I think I did a luster or a pearl also on those, just to kind of get that pinky reddish color. And then we're just using a red buttercream to put on the bottom tier. It's already pre-filled and crumb coated. I just didn't show you that because it was going to be a long video. There's just a lot of footage to get into 10 minutes. I wanted them to be this buttercream to be the same color as those confetti sprinkles. So I just smoothed it out. You don't have to get it perfect because you're gonna cover it up anyways, but I have a hard time controlling myself. I have to get those crisp edges. I have to get them. And there I'm just filling in a few of holes that happen when you smooth your buttercream sometimes. And once I got this part done, I did pop it in the refrigerator for about 20 minutes to do the next step. And now that I pulled it out of the refrigerator, I'm just using I think it's actually that same reddish pink or pinkish red luster dust. And I'm just using a fluffy brush to cover the buttercream because the sprinkles themselves have a sheen to them. And I didn't want the boldness of the red behind the sprinkles, if it were to peek through, to give too much contrast. I wanted it to all be that same shimmery pinky red. So this is just an extra step I did. And I did not put it back in the refrigerator at this point. Because when I put the sprinkles on, the confetti sprinkles, I wanted them to stick. And your buttercream, as it comes to room temperature, is going to get a little bit of condensation. Now use this to your own benefit. Go ahead and use that to get your sprinkles to stick. I started with a fan brush, but then I thought this is going to take too long. I'm just going to use my hands. And yes, my hands are dyed because you see the food coloring I've been working with, and I have not been wearing gloves because they get in my way. My hands are clean and dry, but I do end up getting residue, stained fingers, so that's all that is. And I'm just using my hands to just apply it on there. And that bit that I made, the amount that I made in that bowl, that was, I believe it was 5 pieces of rice paper. And it covered this bottom tier and a little bit of the top tier with plenty to spare. It went a lot further than I thought it would. I wanted to make sure I got a good covering of this, so that's why I'm going around it a couple of times, making sure I fill in any gaps that might happen. Now I'm just brushing off the extra. And put it in the fridge while I work on the top tier. Now I flip that over. That is the top that's on the bottom now, because I wanted the sprinkles to come down from the top. That's a good way to do that. But here's the tricky part. I did not let it sit out to get enough condensation, and that's why you see me having a little trouble getting them to stick because it's a little dry. To counteract that, you could put a piece of parchment paper on the board before you flip it over and wait for it to get a little condensation. Do the same thing and then put it back in the freezer for about 10 minutes with it upside down. Or at least you could turn it right side up and leave the board on there. Put it in your freezer and then take it out of the freezer, remove the board and the parchment. That way it won't stick to the parchment. You need to refreeze that crusted layer. And I'm just installing my boba tea straws to support the top tier. I just did 3 because this was a 4-inch cake and a 6-inch cake, I believe. I think those are the measurements that I used. So that top tier is not very big. It's not very heavy, and it's only got 3 layers of cake instead of 4. That's why it's on the shorter side compared to the bottom tier. So you don't need a whole lot of support. 3 was fine. And then I just used a little extra on the bottom to kind of blend in the where the 2 tiers meet. And I did put some buttercream on top of the bottom tier so that the top tier would stick. And now the fun part, the decorating. At this point, I thought I was going to leave it just the hearts. And that's why you don't see me doing anything with the macarons yet. That was an afterthought. I wanted to add one more element to it. You can do it either way, whatever way you'd rather do. I like both. I like the simplicity of the gold, the red, and the white by itself with just the hearts and the sprinkles. But adding the macarons adds that extra little element, that third element, if that is more attractive to your eye. And I'm just using buttercream to get these to stick. A few of them I used a toothpick behind because they're a little on the heavier side and I wanted them to stick. Just make sure that you communicate that to your customers if you do this for an order, that there are some toothpicks so they know to remove them before serving. And I just arranged these randomly. I wanted it to be more kind of a cascade of hearts. Another thing I added was a white chocolate drip. Now this worked fine, but you would get a smoother drip if you didn't have the texture of the confetti sprinkles on that cake. And this is just white chocolate chips and heavy cream melted together and left to get to a good dripping consistency. Not too thin or not too hot and not too cold. Either one is going to give you a problem. It's that sweet spot in the middle where it drips, but then it stops dripping after a little bit. And I do 2.5 to 3 to 1. First, I want to show you, these are the macarons that I used. I wanted to tell you about this before I finish that. Hopefully I get back to that. These are just macarons. I do make macarons, but when I do my videos, guys, I don't have a whole lot of time. So sometimes I have to take shortcuts, whether that be buying pre-made store-bought macarons that I found at Aldi's that are neutral and work really well. Or if it's, artificial flowers. Sometimes I have to do that just because time and money. So yeah, I added some luster dust in that bag, put the macarons in there and just shook them up so that they're neutral. But I wanted to add a little bit of shimmer to those so that they go with the whole theme. And I'm attaching the ones on the sides with some buttercream and toothpicks. And there you go, guys. It's all done. Happy Valentine's Day. I hope you guys have a wonderful Valentine's Day. And I hope you enjoyed this video and that you try some of these techniques. And if you do, please share with me on Instagram what you come up with. I'd love to see your creations. My Instagram is also Sophisticakes by Mary. So thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch my video. And if you'd like to watch some other videos, go ahead and click on the link to one of these other videos shown here. And if you would like to check out my other social media, I am on Facebook and Instagram under the same name, Sophisticakes by Mary. And please take the time to share, like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you know when I upload another video. Thank you so much, and we'll catch you on the next tutorial.